In this video, we are going to cover a pathway to turning ideas into multi-million-dollar businesses. And we're going to go step by step by step. It's not going to be tactically easy. It's not going to be get rich quick. I think that between now and 2030, there is a really great business model or a great path to follow that leads to tens of millions of dollars. And the more you follow this path, you're gonna really ramp up your business and be super successful. So we're gonna talk about today a pathway to millions and millions and millions of dollars if you follow it. Let's go. Okay, so we're not gonna talk a pathway in terms of like tactical, buy a laundromat and then like sell it to a private equity firm. We're not gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about some key bases. So these are the bases that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about intellectual property into media, media into data, data into software, software into artificial intelligence tools. Now I know that that's going to put a lot of people off. They're like, oh, I thought you were going to give me a really get rich quick scheme that I could just like implement it tomorrow and I wouldn't have to think. Unfortunately, you're going to have to do some thinking, but fortunately, this is going to lead to some big results. So once again, intellectual property, which is ideas, into media, which is content. Content creates data, and data we can learn from. Data we can turn into software. Software we can add AI tools to. So we're going to go through piece by piece, one by one. What are they? How do we create those? And then we're going to string it all together. And if you stick with me, I promise you, this will be a bit of a blueprint that you can follow between now and the next 5 years so that you build a massively successful business. Base number one is intellectual property. Intellectual property is your know-how. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about legally defined intellectual property would be things like patents, copyright, when you do a trademark or something along those lines. I'm talking about the concept of intellectual property, which is that you have unique stuff that you know. You've got unique stories, contacts, you've got insights, you've got methodologies or principles, and that you've also got your way of bringing that to life that's unique to you. So how do you find intellectual property? Here's the activity to do this. You get a timeline and you mark up the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. You go 2023, 2022, 21, 20, 19, 18, 17, etc. Right? So you get a timeline. And then what I want you to do is think about each of those years. Maybe you get out your phone and look at the photos, or you get out your calendar and look through the diary. But I want you to ask this question. When did I do something special for a certain type of person? We got a remarkable result and I can explain it step by step. Now, if you've got those 4 ingredients, you did something special for a certain type of person, you got a remarkable result and you can explain it step by step. If you've got those ingredients, that is intellectual property. That story is a perfect piece of intellectual property. In fact, you may only need one of these to build a massive business. But if you've got multiple examples, you've essentially got the raw material for turning that into something very valuable. So you're looking for stories where you transform somebody's life, where you took them out of frustration or pain and delivered them a great result. Maybe they had tried 20 different things in the past and it didn't work, and then they worked with you and you had the way of them getting what they wanted to get, right? However you did that, however you explain that, that is going to form the basis of your intellectual property. So one of the best activities is just timeline what is all of the examples of you did something special with a certain type of person, you got a remarkable result, and you can explain it step by step. What are all the examples over the last 5 years? That is going to be the basis of your intellectual property. Now, when you make a list of all those stories and you can explain it step by step, you've got the raw materials to move to the next stage. So the next stage is turning your intellectual property into media. Now, there are some people who post online every single day and they never get more than a few hundred followers. There are people who are like creating videos and they never get more than a few hundred followers. There are people who are like doing selfies and talking to camera, and you think to yourself, why are they not getting any traction? The reason they're not getting traction is that their content is not underpinned by intellectual property. They don't have something that's interesting enough to talk about. So what we actually need to do is have strong intellectual property where we've done the deep dive, we've figured it out, and then once we've got that intellectual property, we turn it into content. Content could be media like videos, podcasts, audios. It could be written documents. It could be reports. It could be a book. It could be a movie. It could be a Netflix special, right? All of that could be content. So anything that people can watch, read, or listen to is content. So these are all ways that we can express that intellectual property. You take your intellectual property and you turn it into stories, you turn it into methodologies, you turn it into principles, you turn it into step-by-step recipes. You're unpacking that intellectual property into content where people get to experience the content in a fast, entertaining, educational, enjoyable way. Let me quickly interrupt. I am running a workshop on how to stand out, scale up, and make a bigger impact in your industry. If you would love to master customer acquisition, productization, and differentiation, come and join my workshop. You'll find a link in the description. Okay, so you're creating content or media, and now we're ready to move to the next step, which is the creation of data. So with media and content, we're capturing people's attention and they're engaging with you. And what we want to do is give them ways to give us data. So data could be their name, their email address, their contact information, and it could also be things that allow you to know more about them. Their preferences, their dislikes, the goals or objectives that they've got, the frustrations that they're dealing with, the pains or annoyances that they deal with on a day-to-day basis, the things that they're trying to get done, how much they're willing to spend, what budgets they've got, who they're connected with. All of that forms the basis of valuable data. So how do we go from media to data? Every time you've got a great piece of media that people are engaging with, you might invite them to take a scorecard. You might invite them to fill in a waiting list or an expression of interest list. You might invite people to join a discussion group. You might invite people to opt in for a new product or service, and they have to give some data in order to access that product or service. So these are all invitations to go from a content consumer or someone who's paying attention to someone who is signaling interest with data and someone who's filling in some sort of a form. Now, this is where ScoreApp comes in. ScoreApp is a great way to do this. It provides lots of bridges from content to data. People use ScoreApp to set up waiting lists, to set up online assessments, to set up mini courses, right? All of those things are going to get name, contact information, and preferences and insights about that particular person. And it's all built into the system. So if you haven't used scoreapp.com, that's what you're going to use that for. You've got an audience, now you're going to capture some data. So we've had intellectual property, which is your stories, turned into interesting media content containing your stories, and then inviting people to engage, which is where we capture data. IP, media, and data. That's the first 3 steps. Let's go to the 4th step. So the 4th step is software. Software can be literal software, such as a SaaS product or something that you download onto your computer or your phone, like application, or it could be a different type of software that we call a protocol. A protocol is a specific way of doing something in the world, right? So you've got literal software and you've got protocols. So let me cover literal software. Literal software is that you work with a CTO, a developer, a designer, and you actually put together some sort of portal that people can log into. They can create an account. It helps them to solve a problem. It's something they could subscribe to perhaps. They use their computer or their phone, and then they get access to this particular software that makes some aspect of life easier. Now, the reason that we want to create this after we've got data is because the data tells us what kind of software we would want to create. The data tells us what problem that people have, and then the software is the solution to that problem. The data tells us how many people are suffering that problem and what they're willing to spend, and then we can then use that to create a really good piece of software that perfectly matches up. Protocol is a little bit different. It's like an end-to-end system. You're saying, first buy these things, then put them in place like this, then do these things, then connect with these suppliers. You're actually giving people a step-by-step way of achieving something. So it's almost like a franchisable or licensable system, and it's beyond just giving people a few bases to hit. It's beyond just giving people like a list of things to do or a recipe book. It's a full protocol, right? It's almost like you're saying software in the real world. This is exactly the algorithm to get this thing done. If you're trying to achieve this, you need to go through these steps. So we'd call that a protocol, but I'm just going to call it all software. So we've gone from intellectual property. This is the problem that I've solved in the past for a certain type of person, and here's how we did it. The media, we've explained it. The data, people have interacted with it and said they're interested in it. We've then turned that into a protocol or a software that people can actually get the result. They can replicate the result in the intellectual property. And then finally, we can go to the final step, which is AI tools. So once you've got a protocol, once you've got software, once you've got media, once you've got data, you can actually begin to use all of that IP, media, data, and software to inform a large language model that can come in and support get the result even faster. So imagine you've got a software that achieves XYZ result, but now you plug in OpenAI or you plug in a large language model and it can do 70 or 80% of the heavy lifting for you. So the customer, the person who's subscribing to your software, can log into the portal. The AI is doing 60, 70, 80% of the work for them. They just put a little bit of information in plain English, and then boom, magical things start to happen because of that large language model. So maybe it produces contracts, or maybe it produces scripts, or maybe it codes up a website, or maybe it like produces this amazing output that used to take hours and now it takes seconds. right? But it's doing something. So we've now got software empowered by AI. Now, if you do things in this order and that you pick up an audience and then you pick up subscribers and then you build something that adds a lot of value with minimum human intervention, you're now in a position to scale right up to thousands and thousands of users, tens of thousands of users, paying a little bit every month. Now you've got a very, very valuable business. You've got a business that's probably very profitable. It's got subscription revenue, and the enterprise value on that could be 10 to 20 times revenue as we get closer and closer to the year 2030. So if you're producing something that has strong intellectual property, good quality media that attracts audiences, right? You've collected data, you've turned it into software, you've plugged in AI, now you've got a business that you could sell. And let's say you get $1 million or $2 million of revenue, you could probably sell it for 10 to 20 million of enterprise value. So now you've got a way of generating tens of millions on the back end. Now, is this going to happen overnight? Absolutely not. This is going to take 5 years. Is this something anyone could do? Probably not. It probably requires you to be pretty smart at what you do. It relies on the fact that you've got some good intellectual property to start with. If you're not feeling comfortable with that, maybe you want to join someone's team who is implementing a plan along those lines, and you're going to learn along the way. If you've never thought like this, but now you're starting to think maybe I could do that, don't let this idea go away. Get your hands onto this idea, start creating some actions. Don't let this idea go away. Start the process of putting some action steps in place, right? Identify that intellectual property, start creating some media, get that media to engage, get the data, build the software, plug the AI in, sell the company for 20 million. Easy. So if you enjoyed that video and you got value from it, please put a comment below. What did you take away from that? Are you gonna action it? Let me know. I read all the comments. Give this video a like and subscribe. Maybe forward it onto a friend that you think could be building a super successful business in the years ahead.